Speaking of which, we're going to follow the money today as it relates to James Comey. You know, James Comey made $6.1 million in a single year working for Lockheed Martin. They had contracts with the FBI. And guess who the FBI director at the time was? Robert Mueller. Wow. And he worked from 2005 to 2010, but we only have 1 year's salary from him working for Lockheed Martin. And that was in 2009. Where's 2005, 6, 7, and 8? Where's 2010? Did he make $6.1 million every year? How many of those years did Robert Mueller sign off on whatever Lockheed Martin wanted? Now, I know they wanted the latest, greatest advancement in technology where they would be able to identify people, you know, facial recognition technology. Oh, maybe it's all important. I'm not even suggesting anything nefarious is here. You think we should have known all this ahead of time? Oh, most people. He also made $6 million from a hedge fund. James Comey's a wealthy man. I don't remember him ever saying, Mr. Integrity, that he made all of that money and that he was getting government contracts and that part of the other side of the contract was Robert Mueller. I don't know. That might be a little detail considering he's the one that leaked information that might have been a crime in and of itself to the professor, and then we get the special counsel, and then they pick Robert Mueller. Accident? I don't think so. Doesn't look like it. Anyway, so this new book chronicles all of this. And then Hillary's able to, you know, funnel the money through the law firm to hire Fusion GPS, a foreign national, Christopher Steele, information that eventually, under oath, he says, I don't know if any of this is true. Uses that to get, you know, in 4 FISA applications. Sally Yates, Rod Rosenstein, James Comey, all these people sign off on these FISA warrants as if what they presented the FISA courts was verified, accurate, and true. They never verified or corroborated a thing, but they put their name on it, and a fraud was committed to the FISA court judges and the FISA court, and if any of you did any of these things, I guarantee you, you would end up in jail, and it would be a real Russia case, which we don't have now. We have nothing but taxes and bank applications and taxi medallions. And what else do we have? Oh, lying to the FBI. Don't ever talk to the FBI, and then you can't get accused of lying to the FBI. So if the FBI comes and asks you for help, you're going to say, you're going to have to talk to my lawyer, even though your instinct would be to help the FBI because you love the FBI like I do. The rank and file are great, but you better not lie to them. If you even take the risk of lying to them, you know, you're going to get charged in that case. Well, if we're going to follow the money, this new book that we have been telling you out is pretty interesting. Now, if you remember our good friend Peter Schweizer, he's the one that told us about Clinton Cash, and he wrote about secret empires, how the American political class hides corruption and enriches their family and their friends. He's the president of the Government Accountability Institute. And also with us is Seamus Bruner, and he is the author of this brand new book that is telling the story. It's called Compromised, How Money and Politics Drive FBI Corruption Every Day. Welcome, both of you, back to the program. Now, Peter wrote the introduction to this book. Seamus, listen, you work for a great guy. He's very good on TV and radio. I hope you don't mind him stepping on your book a little bit here.
No, happy to have Peter with me.
Yeah. But so with all this talk, and again, Trump, Russia collusion, 2016 election influence and all this, how did we spin off into, Paul Manafort's taxes and a tax fraud case and issues going back to 2005? How did we spin off into Michael Cohen's medallions? And then we look into the investigators, and this is what I see in your book, and tell me if any of this is wrong, but you're reporting in the book Compromised, How Money and Politics Drive FBI Corruption, which is now out, that James Comey's net worth skyrocketed over 4,000% when he left the DOJ in 2005 and returned to the FBI in 2013. You point out James Comey made $6.1 million after Mueller's FBI granted his employer at the time, I guess he had a consulting firm of some kind, but James Comey made $6.1 million from Lockheed Martin, and one of the largest contracts and contractors in American history, in what you describe as a $1 billion boondoggle. And under Mueller's direction, he was the FBI director at the time, the FBI granted multiple spy contracts to the very firm that employed Comey, or his team to Lockheed Martin while Comey's advising them on the legality of their operations. And that Comey received another $6 million working for one of the world's largest hedge funds and an additional $500,000 for unused vacation time. Do I have any of this wrong, Seamus, or is that exactly corroborated, right, just, and true? Because they're not getting back to me. We've tried to confirm it with them.
No, you have it exactly right, Sean. This is a familiar story, the revolving door, turning public service into self-service. And I think the question you asked, how did we get here, is a very smart and important question. So we followed the money, we followed it to the top, and we found that these choir boys, or Boy Scouts, as the media likes to depict them, James Comey, Robert Mueller, they're really no better than anyone else in the swamp. They use their public service, they use their contacts, and they cash in through the revolving door. So we followed the money, did a full cash analysis, and like you said, we found James Comey's net worth was a modest $206,000 before he went to Lockheed Martin. And by the way, he wasn't just consulting Lockheed Martin. He was their general counsel and a senior vice president at the corporation, which kind of begs the question, why would you choose a young James Comey? He's got no corporate experience of that kind.
So he was working directly for Lockheed Martin. And
directly.
All right, and explain this $6.1 million that Lockheed Martin, how much were they paying him a year? Do you know the yearly salary?
Right, so it's a good point, and in fairness to James Comey, he could have been making $6.1 million before Lockheed Martin received $1 billion boondoggle from Robert Mueller's FBI, but this is according to SEC documents. They only disclosed the full compensation to James Comey in the year 2009. So it's possible he earned that much before then. We just don't know.
Whoa. You're saying the $6.1 million was only made in 1 year?
Just the year 2009, a single year, $6.1 million.
And how long did he work for Lockheed Martin?
He worked there from 2005 until 2010, and then jumped over.
Oh, wait a minute. If he made $6.1 million in 1 year, I'm assuming he made a lot. Why don't you know the other years?
Right. So it's the way financial disclosures work. We only have what they give us. We'd obviously like a lot more. So
well, let's say he was making $3 million a year for the other. How many years now? It's 5 years total. So if he was making $3, it could be $18 million.
Exactly right.
And what does somebody do for 5 years to make, at least in 1 year, $6.1 million? What did he do for the $6.1 million? That seems like a lot of money to me. I think most Americans are going to open their eyes and say, how much?
Right. So in Lockheed Martin's annual reports, James Comey has power of attorney for all of the executives, so he literally signs off on all of their operations, including some of the invasive surveillance programs like this billion-dollar boondoggle. That's not my word. It was reported in Huffington Post that it was called a boondoggle, and that's because it was plagued by cost overruns and delays. But this program, the billion-dollar program to Lockheed Martin, was called Next Generation Identification, and it was a biometric facial recognition program trying to capture all of the faces of every man, woman, and child in America and turn them into a fingerprint, essentially. So that's that came the year before.
Can I interrupt? Can I just go back to? He worked there from 2005 to 2010.
Correct.
And you only could get his pay for 2009, which was $6.1 million.
Correct.
Where are the other 4 years?
That's a great question.
What about the years before? If you can get 09, I would think you can get 08, 07, 06, and 05. Why wouldn't you get those years? I would think they would be released first.
Yeah, trust me, I went through every single year and looked for it. They just don't total James Comey's compensation for those years. But what we do know is in 2004, the previous general counsel made about $6.1 million. So we used very conservative estimates here. We didn't want to go a bridge too far.
So he made $6.1 million. And is it possible it could have been for the 4 years together?
Not possible. I guess anything's possible, but it specifically lays out the compensation for each executive in the year 2009. And this is a combination of cash and stock options, which, interestingly, the stock options were valid through 2020, so he could have exercised them when he returned to the FBI. We just don't know.
All right, so if he has the power of attorney of all the executives at Lockheed Martin, doesn't that mean that he signs off on this stuff?
Correct. He signs off on all of their operations. In the annual reports from Lockheed Martin, they state that James Comey helped successfully resolve certain litigation. They're often sued for various reasons. So he's signing off on operations. He's advising on the legality of them, which helps when you're getting surveillance contracts that many civil rights organizations say are too invasive. And he and his buddy Robert Mueller, it looks like, worked like kind of like a pitcher and a catcher.
So in other words, so it would have been on the Lockheed Martin side, pushing to get the government contract. That would be Comey's role. And then on the other side, the person that signed off on it was Robert Mueller?
Right. Well,
Robert Mueller know that he was getting $6.1 million in 2009?
The annual report comes out at the end of the year, so it's not. I mean, it's not clear, but he obviously would have known that James Comey was at Lockheed Martin, and he obviously would have had to sign off on $1 billion program.
So, but based on what you perceive and your research shows that the role that Comey had at Lockheed Martin, it was his job to sign off on such projects like this new generation of ID and facial recognition.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And would this be something that Congress had to sign off on, or would it be something Mueller needed to approve within the FBI as the FBI director?
Right. Well, James Comey and Robert Mueller have this long history together going back to the 90s at the DOJ, and they've been very concerned with matters relating to surveillance, especially FISA and the Patriot Act. So we see repeatedly throughout the early 2000s and all the way up through today, Robert Mueller, James Comey wanted to tear down the wall, so to speak, between intelligence agencies and had issues with what they called the going dark problem, where they didn't have enough information. So they really rapidly expanded, and I call it the surveillance state, which is now, of course, being used against journalists, citizens, and even now a presidential candidate.
Got to take a quick break. We'll come back more with Peter Schweizer, Government Accountability Institute president, and also Seamus Bruner, author of the blockbuster new book. It's called Compromised: How Money and Politics Drive FBI Corruption, which is now out in bookstores today. All right, as we continue, Peter Schweizer, and he is the head and president of the Government Accountability Institute. Seamus Bruner is with us. They have a brand new book. It's called Compromised: How Money and Politics Drive FBI Corruption, which is now out today. I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but on the other hand, there is a certain expertise that one would have that I could see somebody like Lockheed Martin wanting. An FBI director and a security clearance would be of great value to them, and the contacts that they have would be of great value to them. It doesn't necessarily mean something nefarious happened here. And if you're looking at a company that is getting, $50 billion a year in taxpayer-funded contracts, $6.1 million is kind of small potatoes, isn't it?
Well, Sean, I think what this highlights is this problem. It happens at Health and Human Services. It happens at DOD, where you have government officials who basically, while they're in government, create demand for their own services when they leave. And so in the case of, Jim Comey, he goes to Lockheed Martin from the Department of Justice. At the Department of Justice, he helped establish some of these very programs that Lockheed Martin was getting contracts to implement and carry out. So he sets up these programs. Who is Lockheed Martin going to look for to give a paycheck to, who understands his program better than anybody else? The government official who helped put it together. And that is sort of a tried-and-true story in Washington, D.C. And the point is that, you played that clip at the beginning of Jim Comey talking about, how sensitive he is to the appearances of doing something wrong or wrongdoing. The fact of the matter is this is a very familiar story, unfortunately, in the swamp. And that, I think, is what's so troubling about it. And what Seamus shows is this pattern where, when Mueller is in the private sector and Comey is in government, there seem to be contracts and resources that flow in that direction as well. It's kind of a tag team arrangement that these two have. And so it speaks to the financial underbelly that exists even at the Department of Justice, which is an agency, the FBI, that we expect to be focused primarily on enforcing the law, there are lots of ways in which these officials self-enrich themselves.
Wow, this is a mind-blowing episode here. By the way, if you're just joining us, the book is called Compromised, How Money and Politics Drive FBI Corruption. Now out in bookstores, Amazon.com. It's eye-opening, and I think a lot of questions need to be asked by Congress of the people involved so that we know nothing nefarious has happened. Anyway, I want to thank you both, Peter Schweizer and Seamus Bruner. Thank you both. 800-941-SEAN is our number.